Delighted to take this panel forward. As you know, we're going to focus on delivering a sustainable future. I've got three eminent industry leaders with me. I won't go into CVs in detail because we want to really focus on the topic. But Lynette is the sustainability in charge of sustainability at Capital Land, and we all know what a large player Capital Land is in Asia. Owen, is the head of Boston Properties and also is the chairman-elect of ULI. And David joins us from Hangzhou in Australia. So three people who are playing a leading role in terms of development and sustainability. Now, we're tasked with demonstrating that making a profit and making the world a better place at the same time are not incompatible. So, yes, we recognize there's the need to look at the bottom line or consider the bottom line, but we really believe that making the world a better place is also an important criteria, and that delivering quality real estate, creating better places, and enhancing the quality of life are the secrets, if you like, to a sustainable and profitable real estate business. And indeed, that's what ULI is all about. So, what I've asked each of the panelists to do is to think about how they address these challenges within their business and personally, and from their own experience to share with us how it's possible to be aspirational, yet at the same time to achieve commercial success. What are the measures that they ascribe to success, and how is this aligned with the objectives of ULI? And how do you we saw on the questionnaire and answer to questions how important the community is, so how do you respond to impact on the community? And finally, how do you weave in quality of life and resilience into your priorities? So what I'd like each of the panelists to do is maybe spend 5 to 8 minutes, if I may put it this way, laying out your stall, explaining how you meet these challenges, and and how you achieve a successful bottom line, yet at the same time address sustainability issues. So maybe shall we go ladies first? Lynette?
Sure.
Please.
Thanks, Nick, and good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'm so happy to be here. First of all, thank you. This is glass, not plastic. Thank you. Good, well done, ULI. I thought I would first give it a brief introduction of Capital Land in case those foreign delegates may not know who Capital Land is. It's the largest real estate company listed on the Singapore Exchange. And we are in the midst of closing our merger with Ascendas Singbridge, and that will increase our AUM to approximately $90 billion. We have a global footprint, and our largest coverage is in Singapore, China, and India, and we're expanding in Australia, the rest of the world, basically. So we are... Actually, I'm very happy to be here to discuss this topic because I think the key word is sustainable future. We have been looking at this topic for a while. As you know, I don't think it's aspirational anymore. I think today when we talk about sustainability, we are looking at the world and how it's changing. We are confronted with climate change, a lot of, global warming, flash floods, rising sea levels. In Singapore, especially, for the past 13 years, out of the 15 years, we have been experiencing increasing weather. And we've experienced the warmest weather on record since 1929. We don't feel it in Singapore because our buildings are just too cold, if you know that. And also, rising sea levels is affecting Singapore in a very big way. The government is already taking various actions on the eastern coast of Singapore. All the new developments have to be raised to at least 1 meter high. The new Changi Airport terminal that the Singapore government is building will stand on land at 5.5 meters above the sea level. So this is what we are preparing for. So I guess there are a lot of risks that we're looking at. But I'm not here to talk about doom and gloom. I'm talking about opportunities. Otherwise, I think everyone will leave the room. If you look at what the total investable capital in the universe is today, the International Finance Corporation, which is part of the World Bank, has made an estimate that about $20 trillion US dollars, that's $20 trillion US dollars, will be invested in green-related projects in India and the Asia Pacific by 2030. 2030 is the timeline that the United Nations, 193 countries of the United Nations have come together to make a pledge that by 2030 they have to achieve 17 sustainable development goals. And climate change is one of them. So there's going to be a lot of capital invested in this area, in green-related projects. And the banks are already accelerating that. You see banks coming up with green financing. In China alone, there's an acceleration towards that. Just between 2015 and last year, China has already issued more than $30 billion US dollars of green financing, and that's second to the United States. Last year, they issued 40 different issues of green financing. And so we see that that is gives us a lot of opportunities. At Capital Land, we obtain a green loan, actually it's a sustainability-linked loan amounting to 300 million Singapore dollars, and this was the first and largest for Asia real estate. And that was linked to sustainability and more precisely to the ESG factors that's related to environment, social, and governance factors. And this loan was a 5-year loan which is multi-currency. And if we were to achieve all these sustainability factors, our interest rate will actually drop. So that provides more incentives for us. So we see that in China, there are already 500 green private equity funds. And so we see that there will be a lot more coming forth at Capital Land in order to both mitigate risks as well as seize opportunities. We have already integrated sustainability into our business strategy and making it a strategic thrust, which is, next month, I officially appointed the role as Chief Sustainability Officer, looking at how we can use sustainability to our best advantage.
And rationalizing and relating this to the bottom line, do you find a conflict? Sustainability, trying to achieve these wider goals, does it impact on bottom line?
Oh, absolutely.
Positively or negatively? Say absolutely.
We see that, positively, the measure of value is in many ways. First of all, we have actually developed sustainability building guidelines. And at every stage of our project life cycle, from feasibility to all the way to operations, and even to redevelopment of projects, we look at how we can enhance our return through innovation, through not just environmental sustainability factors, but in many other ways. So in order to also avoid disruption to ourselves, and sustainability is not just about the environment, it's about the longevity of the business. So therefore, it is also about the people who work for us, and it's about talent retention and attraction. It's also about adding value to the communities that we serve. So we measure value in many ways, and I will elaborate on that later on.
Okay,
yes.
Thank you. Owen, addressing the challenge from your perspective, the future?
Yeah, great. Again, pleasure to be here as well, Nick. Thank you very much. Boston Properties doesn't own any real estate in Asia, so I thought I'd spend 2 seconds and explain the company. We're the largest public company in the United States that focuses on office real estate, and we're an owner, but we're also a developer. And we're in 5 major coastal markets, which is important. I'll come back to in a moment: Washington, New York, Boston, San Francisco, and Los Angeles. We do have, humbly, and we're very proud of an industry-leading sustainability program. We're how can you say that? We focus on our GRESB ratings, so we and about 700 or 800 other global property companies participate in the GRESB surveys, and we've been improving our scores, and our relative score has been coming down, which I think is a good thing for the industry, but we're still in the top 8% of companies globally, so we're very proud of that. We have publicly stated sustainability goals that we benchmark to each year in the public market, so energy reduction, emissions reduction, water recycling, and waste diversion. It's interesting, we publish an annual report of our sustainability practices, and I think that's of more interest to the market or the constituents that we serve than our regular annual report, which I think is telling about the world we're in. Before I get into some of the sustainability, I do want to just say at the outset, though, that we need to be a financially successful company to do all the good things that I'm about to describe. And I think you can do well and do the right thing at the same time, and that's clearly what we try to do. And also, I would say, in terms of sustainability and some of the other things that I'm going to talk about, I think we're doing the right thing, but I would also say, importantly, for all of our constituents, that we're doing the smart thing. And what I mean by that is, as I think about sustainability specifically, why are we doing it? It's clearly the right thing, but it's also the smart thing. Our customers care about this a lot more. There's clearly a segment of our tenant base that, believe it or not, is probably not that interested in the sustainability characteristics of the buildings, but there are many that are. So last year, we delivered a major property with Heinz, actually, in San Francisco called the Salesforce Tower, and Salesforce is our anchor tenant, and they put out as much information as we do about the fact that the building is platinum rated. It's got certainly one of the highest ratings in San Francisco. They have a blackwater recycling system that they've installed in the building, and so they promote the sustainability characteristics of the building that we own and they're a major customer of. So I think that's important, and we're seeing that being increasingly important. Shareholders care about this. Lynette talked about some of the capital that's coming into this business. We get asked about this a lot more by investors. There are new index funds coming out that literally overweight companies that have high sustainability ratings and underweight companies that don't. And that's only going to increase. And certainly when speaking with younger investors and people that are focused on this, they want to invest in green-oriented activities. So again, we're doing the smart thing, is going to be able to attract that capital. We did our first green bond in the last year. Lynette, again, you mentioned this, but we probably had a very significant percentage of the bondholders that bought that $1 billion bond issue were green investors, which was important and I think helped the execution. We're in coastal cities. Our communities care about this. And so the more that we can demonstrate to them that we care as well, it helps in our relationships with our communities. And frankly, we need to get ahead of things. New York just came out on Earth Day with a climate Mobilization Act where they actually specified carbon emission targets per square foot that all landlords have to achieve by 2021, and then there's another hurdle at 2025. And this is going to promote better building systems and also the use of sustainable energy. So fortunately, we're going to make it through these hurdles, but that's because we've been after it for a while. So again, we're doing the smart thing. And then the last thing is, I do think by being good at this, we become a more purposeful company. And I think our employees appreciate that. It certainly makes me more proud of what we do as the leader. But more importantly, the committed and passionate team that we have believes that they're working for a more purposeful organization, and I think they derive a lot more satisfaction out of their work as a result.
Okay. Thank you. David, addressing the challenge in Australia. You want to talk first about that?
Thank you for the opportunity, first of all, and Nick, it's good to speak with you. So your proposition or your question was, is it possible to be aspirational in terms of sustainability but also commercially successful? And my initial response to that is you've got to flip it on its head and actually say that the two have to go together. It's not possible to be commercially successful without being sustainable. I don't think it's an aspiration anymore, and agree with Lynette's point there. I think the survey sort of demonstrated it, but really sustainability's come a long way in the last 15 or 20 years. It used to be all about the environment. It used to be about energy efficiency and impact on climate. We used to measure it in terms of building ratings and performance targets, and it was almost viewed as a bit of a cost centre, I think, in development projects. Yeah. It's very different today, obviously, and I think it's a far broader concept, and I think the ULI actually states it, and I'll look at my notes here. It's about the efficient use of resources and creating and maintaining a resilient built environment. So it's much more than just an environmental question now. It's about community, it's all of the stakeholders, and it's about longevity in terms of assets. So I think that's the perspective that we're looking at it from in terms of creating value. I think we all in the room recognise that creating great places creates value. That in itself is a sustainability principle. And I think we're now placing more value on ensuring that we can continue to make our assets relevant through their life cycle. So it's actually far more sustainable to be refreshing and rehabbing an existing asset that can ever be to go and build a new asset by virtue of the environmental inputs that go into that. So we need to understand and anticipate what do our end users want, and we need to be able to respond to that. And I think that's the connection really between sustainability and profitability, as I see it, is you really, at the end of the day, relying on our end users for commercial success. We can only achieve commercial success if we make these places sustainable such that our end users actually fall in love with them. So I think if I can indulge just for a moment and give an example, a current example of a Heinz experience and our approach to sustainability and how that's impacting in terms of profitability, I'll talk to a strategy that we're rolling out in the US and in Australia actually at the moment. So we've observed in various markets a really strong trend for millennial-based office tenants to move to rehabbed industrial warehouse buildings outside of the CBDs. These are sort of urban fringe markets. They're quite gritty and in some cases quite grungy, in fact. But those tenants are making those moves for a variety of reasons. The space has character, and the tenants fall in love with it. These buildings are located in markets where they're great places. There's a lot of amenity. There's bars, restaurants, cafes that provide the out-of-office experience that the workforce is looking for. There's multiple modes of connectivity in terms of transit, footpaths, bikeways, so there's multiple different ways of getting to the office. And really importantly, I think there's an urban identity that goes with these locations, and the tenants and their staff are actually identifying themselves, and they're attaching their corporate cultures to these locations. So we're responding to that by building highly sustainable timber-framed creative office buildings into these markets. Financially, so far, we've got 7 projects now underway. So far, financially, it's been enormously successful. But at the same time, the sustainability benefits are obvious, and they're environmental and less environmental and more social. Environmentally, timber construction is a far superior outcome than traditional building methodologies. We know the construction sector is a major emitter of CO2. Manufacture of concrete and steel, significant outputs of CO2. On the other hand, the growth of plantation timber forests is actually pulling CO2 out of the atmosphere. It's a positive outcome. At the same time, there's other benefits that they're probably harder to measure. We can actually measure that CO2 benefit, but there's others that I think they're just as valuable. The question of measurement, I think, is a really tricky one. But for example, there's various studies that living or working in environments or buildings that have been constructed out of natural materials, there's clear health and well-being benefits, lower heart rate, lower blood pressure, less absenteeism. We believe that there's a positive social outcome in building these assets outside of CBDs, working closer to home, reducing commute times, giving people, the individual, more time with their family and friends rather than being in the office. It's a social benefit, it's a social outcome that's very positive. Providing high-quality end-of-trip facilities to encourage the walk or the ride to work. Obviously, an environmental benefit, taking cars off the road, but also the health and well-being benefit that goes with that. I think all of that is an encompassing sustainability that leads to outperformance from a real estate perspective. I think one of the main outcomes of thinking about sustainability in this way is that it does change our priorities as an owner and a developer. As we're composing new projects now or we're managing our existing assets, we're really just as focused now on the individual end user as we are on our corporate or our tenant customers. And I think that's probably the biggest shift that we've seen. The decision-making of our tenants, at least in Australia particularly, is very much now dictated by what the individual staff members want, rather than, occupancy densities, for example. All of that has to be a part of the equation, but in terms of outperformance from the real estate point of view, we've got to be responding to those requirements. So that really needs us to focus on the quality of life experience, particularly as work and family and leisure blend together more and more. Quality of life is really the key factor as far as sustainability goes.
Thank you very much. Well, thank you all three for your opening statements. Lynette, let's focus a bit on value, shall we? How do we value all the things that we're talking about? It's all well and good to make the fine statements, if you like, but value, measuring value, how do you at CapitaLand measure the success of your various initiatives?
I think first
Do you have
of all,
KPIs, for instance? Do you have targets?
Yes. Well, first of all, we are a listed company, so I think the financial return is absolutely important. We have been registering increases in our return on equity every year, and we're targeting 10 to 12%. We're 9.3% now. So that with financial return, then you can drive sustainability, right? Then you can do all the different things. But we feel that in order to be able to continue doing well, we have to do good. But sustainability is not a CSR, it is part of the business. So in every area of our value chain, we have to integrate that into the whole process. And I think David has articulated it very well. And so maybe one example that I can give you is a project that we have completed in 2017, and that's the Raffle City Hangzhou project, and that's Dr. Wang's hometown, the city brain that he was referring to. We are very, very honored that last week it was conferred the prestigious World Gold winner in the retail category at the 2019 FEPC World Prix d'Excellence Awards. So that is an endorsement of how the project has been proven to be excellent in all the different disciplines of real estate, as well as adding positive contribution to the community, having best practices in sustainability. So since the opening in 2017, the shopping mall has actually registered 97% occupancy, and it has maintained that. So that's the financial side, right? But on the other hand, when we first set out to create this landmark development, we had sights on providing, using that as a heart or a source to create civic and cultural and also community activities in the city center. And that was a new city center at that time. So we have achieved that by drawing in a lot of the community in that area. We have designed vibrant community spaces. We have also incorporated a lot of lush greenery within and around the entire development. In a harsh city center, that is absolutely necessary. Another aspect is that not only has it achieved commercial success since its opening, we have also scored a few firsts. And one is that it was the first project in China's Zhejiang province, in which Hangzhou is located, to fully utilize the building modeling BIM, the BIM model, and in construction. It was also the first integrated development in Zhejiang province to be designed and constructed in accordance with the U.S. LEED core and shell gold standard. So we brought a new paradigm into the whole community in construction. And it was the first shopping mall in China to use natural ventilation on a large scale. And to adapt to the local climate, the solar gain and daylighting concepts were designed in the entire development. And we also had a very efficient building structure so that the amount of materials used in construction was very low. And we also helped to lower the overall energy consumption. So from the value perspective, it's financial, absolutely necessary, but we also look at how we are able to contribute to the community through these different ways. So it's about adding value to the community, and as I think David articulated this long list of all the advantages we can bring to people who are working in our development, as well as our own employees, and being able to uplift and upskill people in the latest technology and in the latest innovation. And in our design, we also look at many different ways of ensuring vibrancy, as well as accessibility. Accessibility meaning to allow different people with different types of mobility to use our assets. So it's optimizing the land use as well, so that we can eventually yield the best return for our investors.
Owen, measuring value. I mean, some cynics will say LEED and other things of that other initiatives of that nature about badging, and do they really lead to a sustainable outcome? I mean, just your reaction and thoughts.
Absolutely. No, well, I mentioned in my opening remarks about the reasons that we do this beyond doing the right thing. You know, the community, shareholder, employee, and customer impact. But in terms of precise measurements, I'd kind of broaden out that question, frankly, a little bit based on the responses that we got. So first of all, in terms of sustainability impact, we measure and report publicly the emissions per square foot of all of our buildings, the energy intensity of all of our buildings, the water use in all of our buildings, and the waste diversion in all of our buildings. So this is all public information. We've got targets to reduce these numbers somewhere between 30 and 50% over the next 5 years. And by the way, we've been doing this for a bunch of years, and we already hit our first level of targets. So, those are real. They're measured, and we've put them out there publicly so everyone can judge us. But Nick, I would broaden out this question a little bit. It was interesting, the answer to the poll. Sustainability was kind of down the list in terms of impact. There was a lot more focus on the built environment and what kinds of impacts do you have. And again, going back to my comments about being a purposeful company, as a builder, you have a unique opportunity to make a big impact. And I think about our own business. I'll go back to Salesforce Tower. The top of that building, which is it's 1,000 feet, which to us in San Francisco is a lot. Here in Shanghai, that's probably not a lot. But the top, 12 to 14 stories of that building is actually a public art exhibit. It's an electronic billboard, if you will, that surrounds the whole building. We don't control it, an artist does. So, every night there's a artistic display at the top of San Francisco that everybody in the city can watch. So, again, we're not controlling that, but our company built that and owns the building. When I think about the community things that we've enhanced, for example, in Boston at the Pru with all of the new retail, food venues, the rehabs that we've done in that complex. In New York City, we have a major portfolio of assets at 53rd and Lexington Avenue that we've completely renovated and opened up new entertainment and food venues that are opening this fall. Again, a complete reorganization of the neighborhood, which has great financial outcomes, but I think great outcomes for the community. And then the other things to think about, that I do at least, about impact are, one, all of the jobs that we're creating as part of this. Not only people who work at Boston Properties, who obviously are paid fair wages, but also all of the service providers to us, all the construction workers and contractors and architects and brokers and the jobs that we create. Public real estate, in a sense, is the democratization of real estate. You can, as we say, for $130, you can own a piece of the General Motors building in New York. And those savers and those individual savers who have stocks like ours in their portfolio, they need that return for their retirement. So again, that's an impact that we're having. We're helping individuals, save for their retirement. In many of the communities that we operate, we're the largest or one of the top 5 taxpayers. So you could say, well, of course you are. You're supposed to do that, but those monies go to public coffers that pay for a lot of public service. And then I also think about examples that we try to set, not only in sustainability, but in the transparency of what we do, but also in the governance. So, they're all, particularly around a public company, there's all kinds of governance provisions around domicile and board activity and proxy access, and Boston Properties is a leader in many of these areas. And again, I think a lot of impact that we have is to provide some of that industry leadership. So sustainability is important, and we're proud of it, and we're excited about doing it, but I think in terms of what we do, there's lots of other impacts as well.
Needs to be examined in the round, yes.
Yeah.
David, we've got lots of questions from the audience, so can I start with you with a question from the audience, because I know it's something that Heinz is very focused on. The question here about end-user experience, in particular in the area of wellness and indoor air quality, and you touched upon the importance of relating to the needs and wants of the end user, so maybe you would like to pick that up?
Yes, I think that's probably as good today measure of the all-encompassing sustainability picture as I was articulating it, that I can think of. I think a lot of these things are actually really difficult to measure because they're all subjective. Mm-hmm. I think Owen raised a really good point, which is, with the public art example at Salesforce Tower, you don't get paid for that. It's really hard for us to measure value attaching with that. But there is an inherent value in terms of what it does for your brand and your reputation, and you're giving back to the community. And that will be of some value to your business in the future, but very, very hard to quantify, I suppose. And that's probably the big challenge, is how do we attach a value to these things that we're doing? For me, again, and some of my answers probably demonstrate that I'm a gritty down in the mud and blood and guts operator and developer. But I think for me, the best measure of value or test of how you're doing on sustainability is the experience of your user. If you're retaining your tenants and you're doing it on the basis of the quality of your product, then there's a good chance that you're doing pretty well on the sustainability front, in terms of responding to all of those issues, not just the environmental issues, but all of the end user experience issues as well. So that's where we really focus. Of course, all of the ratings of your buildings in terms of environmental performance and well ratings and all of those things are very important. We take them very seriously, but we're also very focused on that end user experience. And again, it's about making sure that we can keep our building relevant going forward.
Okay. Lynette, there's a question here about climate change, and that, what you were talking about, we've been talking about around largely defensive, if you like, raising buildings, et cetera, to avoid flooding, et cetera. And the suggestion here that we ought to be, as the property profession, if you like, much more creative in how we're dealing with climate change. Is that something at Capital Land that you're thinking about? Yes, you have to be defensive, of course, but also within your designs, within your planning, building in response to climate change?
Yeah. Well, we think that the greatest impact that we can do is to start from the planning and the design stage. So if we can do the design of the building well, a lot of problems will be solved. And so with that in mind, it's just another example of a building that we completed in Singapore, and that's called Capita Green. It's quite easily recognizable by the flower on top, and that serves a very good purpose. It's, besides as being aesthetically pleasing, it draws in cool air from the top of the building without having to power up the AHUs on top. So the way it's designed, it will naturally draw cool air, and it's 2 degrees lower in temperature above. And we have got a rooftop garden with lush greenery, so that cools the temperatures down tremendously. So as it cools down the entire building, we use less energy to power up our air conditioning. So with that, we have managed to save our energy consumption in dollar terms by at least 10%. In dollar terms. And with that, we have also attained very high occupancy rate. We have maintained occupancy rate of above 99% since its opening in 2014. Our rents are also at least 10% premium above market rents. So, it pays to be sustainable, because as you bring in all these very green features in the building, and that's a desirable factor for millennials these days. The employees of big MNCs are now asking their bosses, what are you doing about sustainability? And so this is a very good point that tenants can make to their employees, that we are taking care of you, we're concerned about your health, concerned about your safety, and to be with the right landlord, I think gives us a lot of credibility, and that in turn will fuel the financial return as well.
Thank you. Owen, a quick question for you. How are you going to spend the money that you raised with your green bonds? People want to know how you're going to invest it.
Well, to qualify as a green bond, you have to use the capital to build gold LEED certified buildings or greater. And we have always underway somewhere between $3 and $4 billion of new development, and all the buildings we build today are built to those standards. So that's what we're using the capital for. Cool. That's why it qualifies to be a green bond.
Right. I'm conscious of time, and I see we have 4 seconds. So just final question, and if you could just answer it fairly succinctly, if you could. Just your advice to those who really want to make a difference. Just one way that they could make a difference, your suggestions, particularly in the context of ULI and the principles and things we stand for.
Yeah.
If you were advising someone how could they make a difference?
Yeah. Well, I think if, making a difference is a super broad topic. Life is choices, so you have to decide how you want to make that difference. But let's narrow it down and to talk a little bit about sustainability. I think about it at Boston Properties. Why are we good at it? Well, we certainly have commitment from management, but we have a passion in the organization. And we have a director of sustainability. He's a decorated person for his work, but he works with people throughout the company that are involved in either measuring outcomes or working on rehabbing existing buildings to have better sustainability outcomes. So there's a much broader team in the company that's doing that. So, I think the key is to figure out exactly what you want to do, and then importantly, particularly as a more junior person, find a company that is committed and passionate about this topic.
Part of the culture.
Yeah, part of the culture.
David, making a difference? Your recommendation to
certainly
somebody?
Commitment to quality. I think commitment to efficiency as well. I think you've really got to understand what you're trying to achieve. So you've kind of got to define the sustainability that you're trying to achieve first of all, and then you've got to find an efficient way of delivering it. And I think it's in the context of what your stakeholders want. And I think going back to our example of our timber frame construction, that's what we did there. We identified a need. We actually dusted off a very old technology. And I think that's another thing to say is don't be afraid of rehashing something. Not all innovation is new. Some innovation is actually a repurposing of something that's already there, and we just apply that in a different way. I think it's commitment, it's definition of what your purpose is and understanding what your end user needs.
Okay. Lynette, making a difference?
I think
How
that
would
is
you
a very
suggest people do it?
Yeah, it's a very exciting area to be in right now. There are a lot of opportunities for us to innovate in this area. We're using digital technology to enable us to look at, for example, the indoor air quality on a real-time basis. How do we measure that? And with data analytics, with different kinds of innovation, and we partner with established companies as well as startups to find new solutions to solve this global problem. I mean, buildings account for 30 to 40% of total carbon emissions, and that's a huge factor. And we, as a growing company that's got scale, we need to influence and be able to have a positive impact. So I think reducing the energy consumption is of utmost importance. We are looking at greening all our properties 100%, having green certifications by 2030, and also having zero I think is very, very challenging, low energy buildings, and that's what we're aiming for. So all this requires a lot of innovation and creativity in building design as well as in operations as well, because in order to sustain that, we need people who are passionate and always looking at ways to reduce energy consumption, water consumption as well. And I think that it is, I would encourage everyone to make sustainability a market differentiator before it becomes mandatory.
Thank you. Lynette, David, Owen, thank you all very much. I think we have demonstrated that it is very possible to take things forward and to deliver a sustainable future as well as accommodate an acceptable bottom line. So thank you all very much. And audience, would you join me in recognizing the contribution from the panel? Thank you.